This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's 9:37. We have a quorum. We'll call this meeting to order and then move into opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak? Nobody? Anybody online? Okay. All right. Moving into agenda item 3 is a staff update. This is pages 6 and 7 in your packet. As you'll see in your packet and on the screens, our upcoming meetings for August through October are listed. Additional updates are, we got an email from TxDOT yesterday or the day before, and you all should have been forwarded the information. They're going to start their traffic count. So if you have citizens that call you saying, hey, we have all these rubber tubes all over the road, please be aware that the Waco district is doing their traffic count. They have a couple of different consultants that are actually doing that work. So if you have questions about specific places and times, let us know. We've gotten a request from one jurisdiction to see kind of what the dates and times and how long the tubes will be there. And so we're reaching out to the consultants to kind of see if we can get a timeline for what that looks like from them. So if you have the same type of questions, just let us know and we're happy to follow up with them. Other staff updates are air quality measurements were 63 and 60 parts per billion. And with that, I don't think I'm missing anything. Are there any questions? Oh, yeah.
I just have one more thing on the traffic count. Someone asked us if we could provide maps. If you aren't aware, TxDOT publishes all of their data to an online system called STARS 2. Staff is happy to point you in that direction and provide some guidance if you want to look at counts. They normally, it takes them until June of the following year to process all the data and like confirm the counts for the previous year. So the counts that are happening this month won't be available until next June probably, but counts from last year, 2022 and before are available. So if you're interested, I can help point you there and provide guidance if you need to know the system. So.
James, any questions on staff update? Seeing none, we will move to agenda item 4. This is an action item regarding approval of the minutes from the July 12th, 2023 meeting. Are there any revisions needed?
There. Yeah, please add Bobby Lewis.
Put that down. Any other revisions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Who's the second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. All right. Agenda item 5 is a discussion and action item regarding revisions to the KTMPO Call for Projects application form and scoring guidelines. This is page 14 in your packet. James?
Thanks, Ryan. So just a quick reminder, background, we created 3 working groups back in January, the policy board did, and one of those was project scoring working group. Since we have our next call for projects coming up in just a month now, wanted to look at the guidelines and see if there need to be any changes. The group met after the June policy board meeting and the July TAC meeting, and there's some discussion and some recommendations from staff based on that discussion, and some revisions to the application form for consideration. I'll go through the summary of changes. This is for the roadway track. One of the criteria is the recommendation is to remove the criteria for local support. There's already one on local priority, which is based on the applicant or the project sponsors rankings of their own projects. And feel like that covers this better than maybe letters of support or that sort of thing, like let the, did you want to say something?
I just have a question. Was
Yeah.
it discussed, like the KISD and other local letters of support that came in under that item? Where would those fall now? Or do they have any impact for community versus city?
Yeah, so the discussion centered around, this was a subjective criteria based on the other TAC members scoring projects, and seemed like instead of having everyone else decide what should be a local priority or not a local priority, the project sponsors are already doing that by providing a ranking of their projects, and so the point should be given for that. There's a separate criteria for that, rather than subjectively based on everyone else's opinions of what is important or not important. Local support, those will still be included with the application and could be considered for others. Subjective criteria, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. If you wanted to give points, you still could, but there's not going to be a specific category for that anymore. If the change is approved by TAC and policy board. The other change to the roadway track is to combine several different subjective criteria into one. So there's 4: multimodal support, transportation handling, livability, sustainability, and complete streets. Instead of being 4 different criteria for a total of 20 points, there would now be 1 criteria with a total possible points of 5, with different aspects of each of those included. I think it's 1 point for each, and then there's maybe sustainability has 2 separate possible points. The overall reduction would be 4 subjective criteria. And just to note before I go on to livability track, the main, staff's main reasoning for recommending these changes after discussion is to reduce the burden on TAC for scoring projects. Now, there's quite a few subjective criteria. It takes a long time to go through all of these. And so this is to help reduce that burden. And at the end, there's a slide that shows how the difference between the possible points before and the possible points now. Talk a little bit about that. So for the livability track, there's some other recommended changes. The first 2 are for some existing categories, and it's not eliminating those categories, but reducing the total possible points to 5 to match all of the other subjective criteria. Yeah, there's subjective criteria. And for both of those, there was a separate category of 5 possible points for projects within environmental justice community of concern areas. And it seemed to provide an unfair advantage to those projects to be able to get double the amount of points as projects not in those areas. So those projects still can get some extra points, but it's not 5 extra points, it's 2 extra points for both of those categories. The same recommendation to remove criteria 7D of local support, and also to remove criteria 6F, which is security and reliability. That one has to do with emergency services response, hurricane evacuation routes, and felt like it's not relevant to livability projects, which are mostly focused on active transportation. And then a similar of creating a new criteria for multimodal support, livability, and sustainability. There's also the complete streets component in there, so that will look the same as the roadway track, or would look the same as the roadway track. Again, there's an overall reduction of 4 subjective criteria, plus the reduction in points from those first 2. Here is a summary of the changes. On the left, we have the original total possible points, and on the right is the revised. The objective scores, total objective points possible stays the same for the subjective. It's a reduction of 20 for the roadway track and a reduction of 50, I think, for the livability track. And just to give some more insight, when something staff did was look at how projects scored during the last round of projects, and something we noticed is that no project was even close to getting the max possible points, and especially for the subjective criteria on its own. I think the average for the roadway was right around the halfway mark, and it was similar for the livability, or maybe even less than that. And so the thought process being, well, on the average, projects are in a pretty narrow band of values. There wasn't much difference between the lowest scoring and the highest scoring. And it seemed like it would be better to weight the objective scores more than the subjective scores, which, right, in the current process, there's more possible points for subjective scoring than objective scoring. So that's sort of the reasoning behind it. To reduce burden, it seemed like those extra points weren't going to make a difference in the long run anyways. No one was getting those points, so we could eliminate some of that to reduce the burden. It seemed like a good recommendation. And that's all I have. There was sent out a revised scoring packet or scoring guidelines document for review, and happy to answer any questions.
One of the things that I don't see, if I'm missing it, please put me in the penalty box for 2 minutes. We talked about the VPAC being involved in the project scoring. Some that, whether that means VPAC assigns the subjective scores instead of TAC, or at least they provide a ranking of what they think the project, which order they should be funded in. And we talked about that, but I'm not seeing it. And that, this is kind of my hill I want to die on. Is I want that community to have a purpose, that they see that they have an actual impact into the funding decision. That it's not just we sit around and we feel good talking about it, but there's no mechanism that they can put their stamp on it. So that's something I feel strongly about. But I'm open to discussion.
I know we briefly chatted about it, but I'm not gonna lie, I've slept since that conversation.
We talked about it. I don't know if we talked about it as a group.
I don't think we did as a group.
I think one of the concerns from staff was that if EPAC is scoring projects, there is some representation from TAC on some members of the TAC, or member cities are represented on both committees. So there's a possibility to get more points that way if your city is sponsoring projects and you get 2 individuals scoring. And then you could mitigate that by having VPAC score the livability projects instead of TAC. But it seemed to us that eliminate one of the purposes of TAC, main purposes of TAC, which is to provide the technical recommendation for such a process. Now I think that's to summarize our discussion. I know last time the BPAC we showed all of the projects to BPAC. It was maybe towards the end of the process. And
Right.
they looked at how the ranking had shook out and provided some input that was then shared with the Tactical Policy Board.
Right.
Maybe we could, I don't think staff has an issue with BPAC weighing in on the process. I think there's just some reservations with the actual scoring, subjective scoring part of it.
Sure. And where I'm perfectly open is how we formalize it. That's fine. Do they do the scoring? Do they provide the ranking? Are they provided the scoring and the ranking midway through the process, and then can suggest changes, which like it says what happened last time, and that worked fine. What I'm looking for is some way that we're formalizing the feedback. How we formalize it, just as long as we do formalize it.
And it just, maybe that's, I don't know that a resolution would be appropriate for that. But as an advisory committee, maybe we can put something in there in the documentation about that's the expectation, that's part of the purpose of the BPAC.
Right.
If it's not there, I'm not gonna lie, I don't have the BPAC stuff memorized, but those are things we can look at and take into consideration to ensure that the BPAC is involved in the ranking and scoring prioritization process of the project goal. And we can look at that and provide an update maybe at the next meeting on what that looks like.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
And, you know, we didn't agree on everything with the last working group. So I understand that there may not be 100% agreement on this, but I just want to see that we're continuing to look at it, finding a way that everyone can get on board.
Yeah, I think there are definitely ways we can look at making that an official thing that the BPAC is supposed to, as far as with providing their input. Because, you know, they serve as an advisory committee for that reason.
Right. Yeah, and tax and advisory committee, so they're an advisory committee to the advisory.
Right.
And then policy board makes the ultimate decision.
Yeah, what if we look into having them provide us their ranking and their evaluation before we make our final decision? And then we can use that subjectively when we're going through, and how sometimes we have to reprioritize, even though we've ranked them all, that there's the discussion then that comes about, and then that's when we take that into consideration, if it's something that's completely different than what this body's preliminary recommendation is.
So to clarify, after the scoring is done, so every project has a score and a rank based on that score. And I know after that, there's still the process of looking at, hey, does this list match up? Does it make sense? But so after that's done, we can send that to BPAC and have them look at how
So is there
everything shook out.
anything that would prohibit them from looking at the projects before we create that list? So I'm saying do it simultaneously and let them develop their own, and then as we're developing ours, and then when we bring them together, we're the body that looks at.
See how well their list matches up with how the project scored, more like that.
I mean, at least it's
So-
a start.
Let me see if I'm following your train of thought. Are you saying that they would get the list, they would do the scoring?
Just like us.
Just like TAC would do. And that's going to give you your ranking 1 through 20 or whatever it is. So then TAC does theirs. They can look, okay, well, how come we ranked this project 17, but BPAC ranked it number 2? What did they see that we didn't, or vice versa?
And it's up to us too to know that they're looking at it through a different lens.
Right.
And so, okay, that's a higher priority for that livability aspect of it. Because I see where their impact to the livability projects would be high.
And then that did happen last time. We moved the project from what, 19 to 11 or something. It moved it up almost to the top 10.
We're speaking just about the livability projects or all the projects,
Just the
I would say just disability.
because there's some, you know, iPad aspects of all of them. What criteria would they use?
The same criteria.
The same criteria?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't do they would rank and score, but those ranks and scores would come to the TAC to be taken into consideration.
Right.
Yes,
So
it wouldn't
that,
be official.
so that the concern of Temple having somebody on the BPAC as well as the TAC doesn't provide an undue advantage.
Correct.
To the city of Temple or Adjourn.
It's just an advisory score for us to take into consideration.
It's a reference point.
Yes.
Well, I think when we workshop this, someone pointed out that, well, that encourages the cities to send rep to BPAC too.
And you do have a lot more cities that are repped on BPAC than you do here.
Yeah, I think we can include that process. And then for the formality part, we'll have to look what that looks like and we can provide something next.
Yeah, I think we would add it in this packet towards the front that it talks about the process for how.
And we could probably, because this is a discussion and action item, right? We can,
Yes.
we could probably make that revision to the guide. Or, recommend approval to the policy board with
Get the
the,
wording.
with the inclusion of the feedback.
Well, and I think if we get your wording, that feedback goes through as an exercise to be taken into consideration by the TAC when they do their scoring.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
So you're gonna, I don't know, it just seems like we're gonna, I mean, we're reviewing it based on technical ability. Now we're gonna be taking another group. Wouldn't it be best if they do their rankings, we do ours? We have two scores, and then that's where the discussion comes in. Okay, now we see all the data. We're seeing it one lens, they're seeing another
Yeah.
lens. When you actually come together and make overall recommendation, go back to the policy board, then it would be our responsibility, then let's review all the data and then come up with that third list that we present to the board.
Yes, that's exactly what we,
Instead of, they do their list and then we look at their list and then we make our list. Like, let's all do it together and then talk to it after we get all, get both of them together, then we talk about it. So,
that's what I suggested.
yeah.
So it was the same thing.
I'm just hearing we hear them and we use their data as a starting point. It's like, I
No,
don't feel comfortable with
So
that.
they would both
no,
score.
my intent and what I had indicated was that we would both get them at the same time, do our independent scoring. And then when we come together to evaluate them, we take them just as an additional,
Yep.
their information as an informal input to our process.
Yep.
And how we've ranked ours, because we'll already have ours ranked by the time we get theirs. But because the timeline is so short from when we have to have these reviewed, we can't have them do ours and then us do ours, and we can't do that. The timeline doesn't match.
So the BPAC, the TAC, and the objective scoring will all be done at the same time.
Yes.
And then all of that would come down to the TAC for an actual recommendation to the policy board.
So once the two committees do the scoring, staff's going to compile it, and then we bring it back to TAC. TAC sees how we scored it, and then we can also see how feedback ranked it.
Yes,
And that's where we can
have our discussions.
get into the weeds. Why did this project rank so high and one and not the other? And I'm sure that's going to happen. Because like you said, they look at it from a different perspective. They're private citizens, they own the bike shop. They're they're in charge of the cycling club, or they're the Bell County Outdoor Group that meets at DMP goes hiking once a week. They're going to look at it differently than the city planner.
Yep.
And that's good. We want to get everyone's perspective.
Yeah, I'm good, and like I said, we can include that in the scoring packet, those revisions.
A couple other, unless, I don't want to stop the discussion, but there's a couple other things that I forgot to mention that I wanted to mention. On those earlier pages, that there is allowance for bonus points to be given to projects based on a simple majority vote of TAC. There's some previous criteria in there for that, something that was mentioned that we've added for this time as a possible reason to add bonus points is if project sponsors are willing to provide additional match above the 20% requirement, we've added that in there as they would be eligible for one bonus point at the discretion of TAC. So not a requirement, but another way to get extra points. And then the last thing was there was a recommendation for the roadway track to, not to change how projects are scored, but when they are ranked, to split all roadway projects into two different column sections. One for the major roadway projects that are eligible for the category $2, and one for the more minor roadway projects that are not eligible for the category $2. This was a TechStop recommendation, basically to make the rankings a little bit more balanced, because the larger roadway projects usually they're still roadway projects, but they can score very differently from the smaller roadway projects like Chaparral. Not that Chaparral is a smaller roadway project, but the non-category 2 or the non-state highway system eligible
Sit down.
projects.
I-14 was
So we have added in some language that after the scores happen, when the ranking is determined, there would be 3 columns instead of 2 columns. If that is okay with the group.
That's just gonna help us visualize once we get through the ranking and then we move to the funding scenarios.
Yes.
So that's already, we're just cued into what's out there. And there may still be some project that's on system that we decide Cat 7 to go for. But at least in terms of the initial ranking, that's correct. Once we get into the funding scenarios, it can get messy.
So that was it. Now I'm done with all of the changes, recommended changes.
For your bonus scoring, I'm assuming that the third bullet point there, the reasoning for the assignment must be discussed openly and documented. So like for those cities who stepped back in order to allow another project to proceed, in previous, that could be used as a justifiable discussion.
Yeah, and I think it's just to make sure that it's being recorded and discussed, and if there are bonus points assigned, that it's written down, this is why the bonus point was assigned, not, oh, so-and-so wanted a bonus point and the TAC voted for it, but for documentation purposes.
Change in the process, how many times do you anticipate the TAC meeting on the school process?
I want to say, just based on the last time we did this, which was 2020, there was 3 meetings, 3 or 4. There was there's I think 2 to discuss the scoring and the priority ranking. And then there was at least 1 or 2 more to discuss the funding. And some of those were not official meetings, they were workshop. Set up as a workshop, I think so. Maybe 2 official meetings or 2 or 3 official meetings and 2 workshops.
We've done that where we call it like an extra TAC meeting outside the regular schedule.
Yeah.
TAC would meet right before or after policy board or, on an off Wednesday.
Yep.
Just because there was questions that we asked during the initial scoring. We didn't understand why the objective score. Can we get more data why that level of service did or did not change? The consultant came back and provided the answers. We had that midstream meeting so we could have a clear recommendation, also going forward. So I'm sure that's going to be the case again.
Yeah, that's my interest is that we have plenty of time to evaluate, absorb, discuss, bristle, whatever, to make a good kind of consensus recommendation. We can't do that in 1 or 2 meetings.
In terms of this document, it doesn't specify the timeline or how many meetings need to occur. There's no requirements. That's at the discretion of TAC and the policy board. I think the only thing that we'd be working with is our MTP development timeline and also potentially the development of the next TID. If we're wanting to get new projects into the TID, then there's some markers that need to be hit for that to happen. But well, as we get into it, we can just see, and if not, there's always revisions that can be done afterward.
Yeah, I'm happy to call another meeting in TAC. Like we did last time. We had quite a few discussions, and we're more than happy to have a TAC meeting and then after have a workshop and then the following Wednesday have a TAC meeting. So that there's a good solid recommendation to the policy board or however that needs to pan out. So that we're not rushing through the process with unanswered questions and sending a recommendation to the policy board that not everybody's comfortable with. And I think, I could be wrong, but everybody in this room agrees that we don't want to send a recommendation we're not comfortable with the policy board, and we want to have those opportunities for those discussions to get everything worked out. Before we send out.
Well, we may not all be very comfortable, but the process is such that we have the opportunity to get as comfortable as we possibly can. That in itself is huge.
And I think we can do that. We have to adjust some timelines if we have to move some things. Moving forward, then that's what we'll do.
Yeah, I would much rather get the policy board, and there's a question about why the ranking or which project got scored the way it did. And we'd say, yes, we're not in 100% agreement, but we managed to reach consensus, and these are the issues we work through. And that has happened, right? That we can then explain that, yes, we did look at it in both times, we did question it. And ultimately, this was the decision of the committee as a whole, but there was some dispute. Make that clear that we have wrestled with it. This is the decision we came to. If they want to wrestle with it again, that's their prerogative. But we've got the process to have those open discussions. Yeah, and like you said, with bonus points. If we're going to do bonus points, then we just have that big shoe on it discussion.
Anything else, James? Any other questions? Further discussion?
So you need a recommendation?
Yeah, this is an action item to recommend approval, but I know we needed some language clarification.
Right. So I'll make a recommend that we approve as presented with the addition of the inclusion of BPAC and their involvement. And you probably go back to the recording and get the wording, but the inclusion of BPAC into the process to be formally added to the project scoring criteria.
I'll second the motion.
All right. A motion and a second. Any other questions, comments, discussion, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion carries. Agenda item 6 is a discussion and action item regarding the 2023 KTMPO call for project dates. This is page 16. James?
We also wanted to just have a formal action on the actual dates of the project call. I know the staff has shared this information, the timeline development schedule with you, but we're recommending 6 weeks, opening September 1st and closing on October 13th. And wanted to have policy board actually approve those dates with tax recommendation. So if this period seems too short, or we like it to be a little bit longer, staff are open to hearing recommendations, but these are the dates we're proposing for the application period.
So this isn't for the entire MTP development schedule?
No.
This is just the project
Correct.
dates? And I say that because in the MTP development, there is a specific reference to BPAC and their scoring process. So we just need to make sure that all of that lines up with what we just discussed. But this is specifically an action to recommend approval of the actual project call dates. Any questions?
Similar to last time.
I think last time it was around 6 weeks too. I don't recall the exact dates, but and it was a little bit later in the year, but.
Yeah, I think we ran into some holiday issues.
Yes.
Last time. I could be wrong.
2020.
Correct.
Or was it 2020?
2020.
Baseball 2020.
My concern with these dates, I don't know about you all, but it's the end of the fiscal year, beginning of the fiscal year for the municipalities, and there's so much paperwork and other stuff going around at that time. Is this adequate timeline to get things submitted in?
It's always, it's always a challenge. You can put it, 3 months, it'd still be a challenge.
So I have a question. So as part of the packet, and I wasn't here for the last ones, are we looking for anything from council, like a resolution or anything to be included in the packet? Or is it strictly just the application? Because if we start looking and incorporating councils, then that is a tight time.
There are, I don't know if we specifically require any resolution of support from council. That is, as part of the attachments, there's a section, I think, after the location and the text of assurance form for council resolution and any local letters of support from ISDs or whoever. Those are not, it says required. If you don't have them, you don't have them. I think if there's a value in having them, we're not gonna not allow your application if those aren't included.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't want us to be the one entity, plus a state/nation that says you can't get funding for this because you didn't provide a resolution when you submitted the project.
Yeah.
Here, even at the COG, we submit applications for grants all the time. If a resolution's needed, we work toward that process, but we're not penalized or unable to submit just because of that resolution typically.
Right, yeah, which has happened, but I just,
Yeah,
my own dealings of getting on a council schedule takes a month just to
Right.
get in front of them.
right. And that would definitely create a timeline issue. All the different jurisdictions. I mean,
Yeah.
some places only meet once a month. And it could take some time. So we understand that.
You can hit a score from local support, which is you're self-evaluating, like you're prioritizing your projects, right? 1 to 5. And so if the staff just does that and doesn't include the council, and then it comes to the policy board, just need to
What's-
like
Yes,
us,
our
are kind of
council
undercutting them.
Well, I mean, everybody's city is going to be different. It is. If you have the opportunity to do the resolution, there's no harm in doing so. But
But that staff member putting in the application is gonna be like, okay, this is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, without having necessarily, not that they wouldn't, I mean, if you want to keep your job, you probably should.
Ours requires before any grant application, council has to take action. It doesn't
to
matter if it's this
to
one or
approve the
that one.
application process, right?
Just to submit the application.
Soccer's code the same way.
So it's like, we do the same, so call comes out, technically, knowing I'm doing it now, I'd go in front, but call comes out, there's no way I can get in front of council. A couple more weeks would help, and then like I say, also budget season, getting my only budget runs is still getting over. I mean, it's a tough year, tough time of year. I really proceed on that part.
Would it help you to put the deadline to, say, November 1st? That gives you some breathing.
I think, a couple more weeks, if any breathing room is helpful.
Estimates.
I guess how does that make the dominoes fall for James, right?
Yeah, I think because what we have to do is we have to back into these dates by the actual MTP,
Right.
And so what is that date?
2050 MTP. Right now, we have a July 17th adoption of that MTP. And our current one was done in May last time. So we've got a couple months of what we're doing wiggling around here. So technically it should probably be May, but the timeline we've drafted is a July. I anticipate if we push the project call a couple more weeks, we're going to have to minimum.
That gets you January, February, March, and April. By April, the TAC would have to make a recommendation for both the funding and the order to the policy board in order for them to discuss it in May and June. And so then that would give us 2 months to do our scoring and bring that scoring in, which is over the holidays, but it's a 2-month period. So even if we went like to the end of October, like you said, November 1st, that gets us 2 extra weeks. Roughly.
Yeah.
Which is the 8 weeks, so you can get on the agenda, but maybe not have all the attachments as you're working through to get before your council's bodies.
You're right, your goal is to have MTP project listing done clean, all the MTP chapters done clean, and just adopt it.
Correct. Then, of course, with the project call and everything, we have required public involvement,
Right.
periods and processes we have to go through as well, so.
All of this.
Because if we separated the two, you got all your MTP chapters at that, and we were still working through project listing, and that's just an MTP amendment process. But that's visual public involvement. It's messy, it drags it out.
Which is what
I don't
happened
think it's
last time.
preferred. I think preferred we just
Get it done.
keep it together, get her done. And maybe that's back to Bob's point that there may be some additional meetings in between where we're coming together to get the price scoring hammered out.
I think we could extend a couple weeks. It will shorten some time later in the process for scoring discussion, something probably, but I think we could.
And, yeah, I think my question is to stay kind of on the timeline that we've got. If we push this to November 1st, can the scoring still be done? Basically, we take 2 weeks from the scoring. What does that look like for the TAC? Can you still do that, or do we need to push that an additional 2 weeks as well? Because that would still give, it'd still give a month to score, but.
6 weeks from November 1 to December 15.
Yeah.
So that's 6
40,
weeks.
45 days.
Then that also raises the question of how much time does the consultant need to do the travel demand line?
And we still need to select them, so. Which we're working on that.
Yeah. I mean, if we push it to November 1st, we can always provide updates as we go through on what that looks like for the rest of the process.
If we push it to November 1st, it looks like then maybe we're just adding another meeting in April based off the timeline we have in here. And we could still meet the same, just have to go through and adjust the dates on all of these. They'd all be kicked back one. That makes sense. Because you only have the,
And that, I think that's why I was kind of trying to see if we could, if there was still going to be, that we're going to be able to still score. Instead of having 60 days to score, they would have 45. And that way we're only pushing this one part of that MTP timeline.
So we're looking at the calendar down here. It's October 27th is Friday, so 13th is Friday. So we push it 2 weeks, that's the 27th
instead of November 1.
instead of November 1, which a couple of days. Yeah.
So now, I was suggesting to these guys maybe the 20th, give an extra I'd rather have more time in the debate, in the evaluation. But I fully appreciate that stuff. It's one of these things that, now that I know what we do here, I'm going to gear up.
And this is, having this discussion, staff can make a note for next time, like, hey, if we can set the dates as early as possible, then all the cities can work on getting the approvals ahead of time, because there's nothing, get the resolution anytime and just include it with the project call, knowing it's coming up.
Well, that's a key thing. You don't have to have that with the application. So you don't have to nail it during these 6 weeks.
Right.
You can provide it in November or whenever.
Yeah.
Challenge that you're running to. Front end is making sure that your elected officials are informed about what you're doing.
They're not surprised.
Well, and
You can
like we
resolve that.
indicated, there's some municipalities you have to have it in order to even submit it. So you can't wait till November or whatever to put it in. So any advanced time that we have would be appreciated. I mean, if we push it back to the 27th, that gets you 2 extra council days to get in front of them.
And that's not to say that if you've got your application ready by the 13th or sooner, submit it. That way staff can get their, the work they have to do on the application. They get it all compiled, and then as the other ones come in, then they just take them as they come. And I speak, having sat in Jake's chair, that it was a nightmare on deadline day because everybody would drop their stuff on deadline day. So don't wait till the deadline. Submit it. That way, if you have questions, hey, you said it was 5 million on the map, but then your application, you said it was 4.5, which is, so give you time to make sure that everything's clear. So that just respects your time. If you've got it ready, drop it on staff. If you need more time, then you've got more time. I'm good with either the 20th or the 27th.
And like James said, at some point, if the TAC or policy board shows we could extend, say we go to the 27th, and there are issues that are happening, the policy board can extend the project goal. Should it be needed. Of course, like I said, there are other date things that we have to take into account, timeline issues, but of course, staff, we support whatever the decision is. You guys know what's required from your jurisdictions and how that process works. You know what those timelines look like. We sit in here in an office and don't do a whole lot of city council involvement.
You should come, that's fine.
Yeah, come on, yeah.
So we're more than happy to move the dates according to what you all think the process is going to be.
I think moving the intake to the 27th, but keeping the 15th of December is still doable. As long as we get that information from you all in a timely manner, because I know that transition takes some time for us to get those packets to actually review.
I think we can prepare as much as we can to have it gear. The only, like Jason said, we'll want to look through all of them and make sure everything, all the information is there and is correct before we send out everything. So that would be the only delay, I think. But other than that, we send them out as is pretty much, since that's has all the information. And I think the process we used last time was for submission and sending out was pretty easy for everybody. It's just an online shared drive. So I think that's doable. We can extend 2 weeks.
I mean, even if you all take a week to get all that information together, it still gives us 6 weeks.
Any other questions?
Whatever dates we approve, are you going to update the website?
So this, of course, is an action item for the 2023 KTMPO Call for Project Dates. I have a motion.
Motion to approve with the date change of the submission to the 27th.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, update. Agenda item 7 is a discussion item regarding updates on the KTMPO Workgroups. Bylaws work group met last month. I've sent some information, working on scheduling a follow-up meeting with the members of that group to discuss moving forward, and I'll let James speak to the other 2 work groups.
I won't touch on the project scoring since we just discussed their discussion at length and approved the recommendations. The safety group is scheduled to meet right after this meeting for the first time, and staff anticipate that group will meet several times over the next few months as we prepare targets for safety targets for 2024, which we normally adopt in January, I believe. So we'll have more information after the next meeting.
Questions on the work groups, comments? All right, seeing none, we will move to agenda item 8, which is a discussion item regarding an update on the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Okay. SICOG has signed. We have a fully executed agreement with Federal Highway, so we can start work on the SS4A project for the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. We got 3 RFP responses back from the RFP we sent out. The SICOG and KTMPO officers will be meeting today virtually to discuss consultant selection. Following that, we will enter an agreement with the consultant and we will start moving forward. The consultants will be expected to, of course, create the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, provide updates to TAC Policy Board, all the participating jurisdictions, as well as track any and all in-kind match that is required. We haven't gone to the cities for match because we actually took this to the counties previously for resolution for match for the MPO area. We met with Bell County, of course. They passed a resolution, their resolution depending on, for the match, their resolution depending on the consultant selected will need to be revised probably because the original cost and match estimates that I had are inflated significantly compared to the responses we got from the RFP. Coryell County, of course, they did a standalone application, which they, we worked together to get them coordinated and pulled into our application. So they are actually a sub-grantee. So for their portion of the MPO, Coryell County is going to cover that part of the match. And then Lampasas County, which we still have to have some additional discussions for their portion of the MPO. That being said, for match to be counted, if you have meetings, if you have discussions, if you travel, if you do anything Safe Streets and Roads for All related, please document that and send that to us. That will, that information will offset the cash match requirement, since everybody, in the MPO is either if you're in Bell County, submit that to us so we can add it to the Bell County match portion. If you're in Coryell, please submit that to us so we can submit it to Coryell. Same for Lampasas. That being said, we're good to move forward. I ask if you'd like somebody from the MPO or the COG to come speak to the council or workshops or whatever, please let us know. We're happy to do that. We're happy to have our consultants, once selected, come speak to what they'll be looking at and looking for. We'll start moving forward with the consultant once that selection's been made, hopefully this afternoon. Any questions on Safe Streets and Roads for All grant?
We'd love to have you for my council workshop. Need about a 3-week minimum interest, maybe 4 preferable. But as soon as you know who the consultant is, just let me know. I'll start working, getting on our council workshop.
We will, and I anticipate we'll send something out to the policy board and TAC, just so when you start seeing emails come in from a consultant, you're not like, oh gosh, what the heck is going on? So we'll send that information out as well. All right, any other questions, comments, discussion on the SS4A grant? Seeing none, we will move to agenda item 9, which is a discussion item regarding an update on the possible MPO boundary expansion. I have not received the financial information I have requested from TxDOT to date. I did have some correspondence with them at our last TEMPO meeting. I met and spoke with a couple of the folks in the planning division, and then they sent a request for some additional information from the MPO on the potential boundary expansion, and I did reply to that, so I'm just waiting on anything from TxDOT to see what that possibly even looks like as we navigate this possible expansion. As I have updates, I'll share those at upcoming meetings. Any questions on that? All right, seeing none, we'll move to agenda item 10, which is a discussion item regarding public input received through July 2023.
We do have one new public comment. This was an email sent to TxDOT and then shared with us since it's in our area. And I won't read the whole email because it's quite long, but the gist of it is this citizen wants a ring road around some part of the region and more sidewalks and bike lanes, which I know Andrew's working very hard on. So that's all we have for this month.
Questions on that? All right. We'll move to agenda item 11, which is member comments. Are there any member comments? All right. Agenda item 12, and we will adjourn the meeting at 10:35 a.m. Thank you, everybody.